Now, what I want to explain to everyone is what I call layered grooves. What layered grooves are, the different patterns I put on top of the rock beats that you're learning. Now, in the CHRIS Brien Drumming System Level 1, there's 2 pages of 8th note rock beats and there's 4 pages of 16th note rock beats. So as you're learning these beats, there's other patterns you need to put on top of these patterns that you're playing on. I'm about to explain that. Because when a drummer plays, the drummer doesn't just always play on the hi-hat. The drummer uses the ride cymbal, cowbells, all sorts of things. So we're first going to learn to play a basic layered groove using the ride cymbal, the bass drum, the snare drum, and the hi-hat. The one I'm about to show you is exercise 1 out of the layered grooves for the 8th note and 16th note rock beats. Now, to do this, first of all, you're playing just a basic rock beat. But we're going to use the ride cymbal instead of the hi-hat. Now, something to be aware of the ride cymbal. You have the actual rim of the cymbal, but this part here is called the taper, this part that tapers off. And this is the bell. And the thing to understand is the further you go away from the center of the cymbal, the less of the attack of the drumstick you hear. You'll see what I mean. So the entire cymbal is extremely musical, and we want to use it all. Generally, when you're playing on the ride cymbal, in this case with the tip of the stick, you're about halfway into the taper. That way you get resonance and attack of the stick. But if you want to go for this sound, that's great, that works as well. I'm going to, for the sake of these exercises, play in the middle of the taper of the ride cymbal for this first one. So this first layered groove, what you have to be able to do is play a basic rock beat. And when you hit the snare drum, you want the hi-hat to go at the same time. Now, with the hi-hat, you don't want to hear this sound. You want to hear this. It needs to be tight. It can't be just like a loose, floppy sort of sound. It needs to be tight. At first, you learn very simple things with your left foot. In time, learn all sorts of wonderful patterns. So what we want to be able to do is to play a basic rock beat, as I was saying, with the hi-hat at the same time as the snare drum. With the hi-hat technique, which I should mention, I like to have my heel up and come down like this. Only open it a little bit. Don't sort of, just a bit like this. Some people like flat foot. Whatever works for you. So this is the pattern. Once you've got it, you need to start going through your rock beats. So this would be number 1 in your 8th note rock beats. This would be exercise 3 in the 8th note rock beats. 1, 2, and 3, 4. This would be exercise 16 in the 8th note rock beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be, say, exercise 21 in the 8th note rock beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, and... I think you know what I mean. So the idea is once you can get through the first 2 pages of 8th note rock beats, you just want to improvise on playing 8th note rock beats while you still do the hi-hat with your left foot. Now, as you get comfortable with it, you then want to move on to the 16th note rock beats. A little bit more coordination is required, but a bit of slow practice will work wonders. So the first rock beat in the 16th note rock beats, in 16th note rock beats part 1, is this. And let me explain this beat. What's happening here, we've got essentially like a beat which is like the first beat that you learnt. But before the second snare drum, there's an extra bass drum, which we call a 16th note, which is this. Make sure that the 16th note is right in between. Say that's the hi-hat before the second snare drum, and that's the hi-hat with the second snare drum. You want it there. You don't want it there. I hear a lot of drummers doing this. And rushing it. Relax it. Do it slowly. So when you apply that to the layered groove, playing on the right cymbal with the hi-hat with the left foot, you get this. If I was playing number 11 in the 16th note rock beats part 1, it would sound like this. 1, a 2, and 3, a 4, and... And if I was playing number 20 in the 16th note rock beats part 1, it would sound like this. 1, a 2, and 4. Now, in the 16th note rock beats part 2, they're dealing with a 16th note, which is the second 16th note, because in the ones I just played, I didn't mention, I should mention this, it's the last 16th note you're playing on your bass drum, which is creating that sound. Now, 16th notes are notes which you hear a lot on the drum set. 4 notes per beat. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. There's 4 notes to each beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E, etc. And when we're playing the first 16th note and the last 16th note. 1 E and a 2, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2, 3. But you're not going to say that, you just feel it. But when I'm doing this, that's the second 16th note. So that's like 1, 2 E, 3, 4. Remember, in 16th notes are counted 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. The first 16th note is a number, the second 16th note is the E, the third 16th note is the and the fourth 16th note is the R. So on these beats, we're dealing with the second 16th note. Anyway, so number 1 in the 16th note rock beats part 2 in my book, the CHRIS Brien Drumming System Level 1, would sound like this. 1, 2 E, 3, 4. And you go through all of those and you'll learn how to play them, or I should say you learn how to play all these bass drum patterns under this pattern. Now, and the idea is once that's comfortable, you should be able to just play some beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's layered groove number 1. Now, in the layered grooves, there's 8 of them in CHRIS Brien's Drumming System Level 1. I'm not going to go through every beat with all the layered grooves, but I think you now know how to understand how this works. The next layered groove you need to learn is again on the ride cymbal. This time, instead of just playing on the taper of the ride cymbal, you play on the bell of the ride cymbal to the taper, playing 8th notes, the chick, chick, chack, chick, the ones we learnt before. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So your right hand's doing that, while your left foot is playing quarter notes. Now quarter notes will be the same as the bell. In other words, you'll have this. And once you've got that going, you need to learn to play a basic rock beat under it. With all of these layered grooves, you need to first learn to play just the basic first eighth note rock beat with these patterns. Otherwise, if you try and go into, you're just going to get confused. Just start simple first, then you'll build up your understanding of these rhythms. So the basic layered groove is this, with a bass drum on the count of 1, a snare drum on the count of 2, a bass drum on the count of 3, and a snare drum on the count of 4, which would be this: 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you start going through your beats. First your eighth note beats and get used to them. First try and get number 3 going when it comes to doing a bit more with your bass drum. That's number 3 in the eighth note rock beats. And number 3 is this. But with this pattern, is this. Because you've got a bit of coordination going on here with the feet, and maybe break it down just to the feet first. Then maybe try and bring the right cymbal in, and then your snare drum. Now the reason I get people to go this way rather than just this, is because if you can do this, then surely you can do this. And it's a good sound. So I'll pick the tempo up a bit, and I'll sort of play around with this layered groove. 1, 2, 3. So that's layered groove number 2. Layered groove number 3 looks at using ghost strokes on the snare drum. Now, ghost strokes are these cool beat patterns you hear within beats that us drummers tend to use. And at first, we have to make it real simple so as we can learn the pattern. Now, I tend to usually always do a rim shot, and I should explain this. A rim shot is when you hit the skin and the rim at the same time, as opposed to. Now the rim shot is generally associated with a loud note on the drum. You can still do it quietly, and you should learn to play it quietly. It gives you a different tone out of the drum. Don't confuse it with a rim click, also known as the rim knock, rim hits, side stick, cross stick, all sorts of names. So if you're reading some music and it says rim click, don't start doing that because the band leader may not appreciate it. But if it says rim shot, if you're doing that, it might sound a bit strange. It might work. I don't know. You work it out. So the rim shot, you're just coming down. You need to lower your hand a bit lower than usual, just so you're getting in contact with the rim and the skin. I tend to have my snare fairly flat, so it makes it easy to use this rim. Okay, so we first have to learn to play a basic rock beat with a rim shot, which might take a bit of time. If you can't get the rim shot, just sort of hit the snare, as you normally would. Okay, now in the layered groove number 3, there's an extra note attached to this snare drum, which is a 16th note. The first note it's attached to on the snare drum, that one is a dotted 8th note, which is attached to the 16th note, which you'll see in layered groove number 3. Now, the extra note, the way it's written, would encourage you to do this. But since I've got a little arrow under the note, which means play it louder, that's an accent, which means you play that note louder. And when you've got accented written on snare drum notes, all the other notes are to be played as what we call ghost strokes, really soft. So we get this. I encourage people to play that softly at first, because any monkey can do this. Which works, but again, remember the most important thing of this instrument is time and groove. Not time and playing fast and doing tricks, it's time and groove. So this has more dynamics than this. Not that you don't use this, because this is wonderful. But if you can do this, you may not be able to do this. But if you can do this, it's certainly much easier to learn to do this. And they're two different grooves. Remember, time and groove are the most important thing.